Before October 7th of 2023, have any of you ever confused Palestine with Pakistan, whether in Chinese or English? They're pretty similar, aren't they? When I first returned to Hong Kong after volunteering in Palestine for half a year back in 2022, I was startled by the sheer number of people who did. But perhaps it is understandable. Many schools in Hong Kong probably would not have offered an introduction to the Middle East throughout 12 years of education. Mine did not. And the Middle East does not figure much in local news or discourse here. Nor is Hong Kong the cause of the suffering happening halfway across the world. So many would say, probably there's no reason to know about it. Now, as a Hong Konger who have traveled to the Middle East several times and worked in NGOs in Palestine, Lebanon, and Kurdistan, I disagree. What I hope to do today is to make a case for why we should all know about what is happening in the Middle East, and I hope it will be a convincing case. Let me begin by showing you two photos. I would like to invite you to think about the differences between them. So here's the first one. You see a creature here that might be a duck or a rabbit.
Bad.
Here's the second one. It is a photo of the Gaza Strip today, after 1.5 years of endless bombing by Israel. Now, similarities between them are that they're both contentious. They're contentious in the sense that they might be subject to different interpretations. In the first photo here, you might see a duck or you might see a rabbit. In the second photo here, some would call it the intentional destruction of an entire population and society. Others call it a necessary and proportionate measure to safeguard national security. The difference, unless you're a duck lover or a rabbit lover, what the creature is here does not really concern you. When you look at the photo here, the image must pull some strings within you, as long as you're a human being. Shock, disbelief, frustration, anger, or grief, maybe. These are what we call human emotions. Now, as you would all know, Israel has carried out a brutal onslaught in Gaza over the past 1.5 years. Once a place full of life, Gaza is now left with virtually no infrastructure, an extremely famished population, and a death toll of over 46,000 people, amongst whom 18,000 are children. It's just politics at the end of the day, many would say. It's unfortunately not wrong, so why do we need to know? Because indeed, we can go to school or go to work every day in Hong Kong without having to worry about any of that. And even for me, this was a tough question, because like many of you probably are, I'm myself an undergraduate student at HKU. But I also care deeply about the Middle East because of my personal experiences and the connections that I have built since I first stepped foot in the region. Yet I ask myself every day, why would I go through the torture of watching Gaza being destroyed on screen and making myself numb over the death toll that climbs up day after day? So only as I was reading the book Dissident Syria recently, a book about political dissidents under the Assad regime in Syria, I found a quote by the Syrian poet Mamdouh Adwan, which eloquently answers this question. The quote goes, "No poem, no piece of music can overthrow a dictator, but it can resist the normalization of oppression. It can focus on human beings and their deep humanity, reminding themselves constantly that they are human." The emphasis here is the word human. What could be more important than reminding ourselves of humanity? And what does it mean to be human? I propose a very simple answer. It is precisely the ability to put yourself in others' shoes and call out injustice or wrongs for precisely what they are. Or in other words, empathy. Now, let's take an easy example. Imagine with me for a moment. Did you all have lunch today? Yes, right. So, suppose destiny had gone differently. Instead of who you are, you're a Palestinian in Gaza. War has befallen your land, and your house has been bombed to nothing. You've moved from tent to tent over the past few months, and they might just bomb the tent you live in right now as well. You don't really know whether you would live to see tomorrow or whether you have anything to eat in the next meal. So this is your life. One day you might have no food. If you're lucky, the next day you might have some beans and some bread. On the third day, you might have some onion and some bread. This is the average food intake of a person in Gaza over the past year, according to a report by Al Jazeera. And this is just one aspect of Israel's assault on Gaza, not to mention the lack of proper sanitation, clean water, medical supplies, etc. And of course, the constant fear for your life. Can you imagine yourself going through all of this? No, right? But the thing is, it is by chance that we are born Hong Kongers and Palestinians are born as Palestinians. It is by chance that they suffer whilst we do not. When we're all human beings on the same planet, we cannot stand to be treated that way. There's no reason why Palestinians ought to be treated that way. And most importantly, there's no reason why we should choose to look away, stand by silently, or to get used to it as a norm. Here is a quote by Malaka Shuaich, a Palestinian scholar from Gaza who now lives and teaches in the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. I had the privilege of working on a research under her supervision when I was in first year in university. So in one of her articles, she wrote very eloquently that they do not choose resilience. Palestinians are tired of being objects of work that expect their constant strength. They do not want to remain stories of documentaries or TV series, but want collective justice and dignity. Now here it is, I cannot stress enough how important it is for us not to feel numb and not to get used to the wrongs that are going on. Many may say that our hands are tied even if we see and know what is wrong, but that is not true. There is in fact a lot we could do. Now, Israel's assault on Gaza has once again brought the Palestinian struggle for freedom to the forefront of news headlines and civic movement around the world. For a while, it might have seemed that Hong Kong is conspicuously lacking in action. But the devil is in the details. So here, I want to honor a friend of mine. The lady in this photo is a local Hong Konger. She also had some experience of exploring the Middle East when she was young, but she's now comfortably retired. Although over the past year, she took up the task of a full-time solo protester virtually 7 days a week. So every day she would walk and stand for hours with these banners in some of the most crowded areas of Hong Kong, like Causeway Bay, Admiralty, Central, and notably even before the US consulate. I once joined her for a day and felt the power of creative individual acts of raising awareness. We walk by over hundreds of people every day. So if you pass by us on the streets, you simply cannot ignore us. You cannot not see the banners. The day after the ceasefire was announced, she texted me in endless excitement. She said, "Angel, I finally have time to myself. I no longer need to stand and walk in the streets with these banners. I can do whatever I want." Her persistence in these small acts of raising awareness for the Middle East touched me so deeply. And amongst the younger generation, there are also creative initiatives springing up around us. For instance, last month, I attended a performance of a play called The Promise. So the play reflects the struggle of artists in Palestine and the determination to resist the occupation through literature, theater, and performing arts. It was an adapted Cantonese version of the play performed by local actors in Hong Kong. And it was stunning. The effect was immensely powerful once the script was performed in Cantonese. I could feel the sentiment of everyone in the audience around me. Because with the power of performing arts, the Palestinian experience crystallized into a sense of solidarity and human connection with us, Hong Kongers, halfway across the world. And it also touched me particularly deeply as well, because what brought me to Palestine and the Middle East in the first place was performing arts, or ballet more specifically. I was a volunteer ballet teacher in a camp in Palestine for half a year. And in Hong Kong over the past year, I also worked for an organization specializing in political education and advocacy for Palestine to do online research and write up explainers on all the different ways in which Israel is oppressing Palestinian rights. There are a lot of different ways that we could answer the question, what now, in the face of injustice happening around the world. The responses can be small, it can be anything, but it cannot be inaction. And in practical terms, your care and support matters much more than you might imagine. Every organization, from UN agencies to grassroots communities, require funding and support. Contributions are easily doable for us, but it means the world to them. The reality is that the aid industry is extremely dominated by and heavily dependent upon heavyweight donors, which very often are the same great powers that play a part in inflicting harm on the local population. And that includes by manipulating humanitarian aid. Through my time in the West Bank and Palestine, I was working within an UNRWA camp. UNRWA is the UN agency that is mandated to provide aid and services to Palestinians. It was set up right after Israel was established in 1948. In these camps, almost all basic services like education and health is provided by UNRWA. And similarly, when I was working in Lebanon on the issue of Palestinian refugees, it's also crystal clear that aid dependency is a serious issue. And yet it is in this context that Israel has legislated to ban and shut down UNRWA operations in the occupied Palestinian territories. That ban has already taken place in East Jerusalem. It is also in this context that Western countries have arbitrarily cut funding to UNRWA based on unsubstantiated allegations. The only way out of this systematic loop, I propose, is by decentralizing aid, even if just by a little. So by that, I mean humanizing rather than institutionalizing the responsibility of helping. Aid, like advocacy, solidarity, should also be a collective effort. Just in the previous semester, I did a small study on the willingness and practice of Hong Kongers to donate to NGOs serving refugees. And this was one of the interesting findings. When participants are asked who they thought should be most responsible for contributing to these NGOs' work, most of them responded that it's either the UN or various governments involved in one way or another in a humanitarian crisis. Bearing in mind, of course, that the UN is also funded by different governments. Now, in the modern day, decentralization has taken place around the world in different sectors, different fields. So why can't aid be thought of the same way? Going back to one of the most fundamental tenets of human life, is it not somehow in our basic nature to help one another out at difficult times? When others are suffering, we should all be part of a collective effort in helping, rather than leaving it off, expecting the UN or different governments to do the work. There's a lot that can be done, and we can each play a role. The most important thing is for us not to look away, and not to get used to oppression or injustice as a norm. It is for us to know and believe that there is an answer to the question, what now? This is how we do not lose hope. This is how we navigate the inevitable suffering in life with empathy, strength, resilience, and solidarity. All of what we call humanity. This is the case for Gaza, for Ukraine, Sudan, Congo, and beyond. Thank you.